was finished and dedicated in July of 1934. The library and the police department were in this building as well. So, in the 1920s and 1930s, we had a lot of famous photographers who came and took photos. So this was an actual photo of Ansel Adams, who was commissioned by Fortune magazine to come and take pictures in Los Angeles, Long Beach, Seal Beach, and other towns in the area. And some of the famous photos that he took was at Sunnyside. And a little side note, I know I talked about it last month, but if your Uncle Joe was buried at Sunnyside and they built a oil derrick right next to his grave and they struck oil, you actually would inherit and get a royalty for that amount. How much ever, whatever it was. Here is the famous Ansel Adams angel in the cemetery, and this was in 1939. The oil derricks were everywhere. So, in 1934, the city of Signal Hill hired men to start taking pictures of the city buildings and the landscapes that were on city's property. So, the famous, they called it the tents, they called it the shacks. Amen was responsible for this photo. And if you look at some of the pictures, you can see the woman sitting down is Mary Tribe, our first librarian. Here is the second picture of, this is a picture, if you look in the far back, is where the second half of the shacks were. And it was more Signal Hill employees standing and taking the photos. So, with the new construction of the City Hall, Inman went and took all these photos and compiled everything and gave it to the city. So, moving on, let me backtrack a second. I don't have it on here, I apologize, but I have some City Hall facts from the 1930s. So, City Hall was constructed in 1934 in the Art Modern style of architecture. The total cost was $40,000. Let me go back. So, as I talk, you can see the City Hall. The initial design was by city engineer A.A. Taylor. The consulting architect was Kenneth Wing, who was also designed the Hancock Oil headquarters on Hudapedo and the Harriman Jones Medical Clinic. California Governor Frank Merriam, from 1934 to 1939, proceeded over the grand opening ceremonies. Over 1,000 people attended the opening. 800 people were served refreshments in the basement following the ceremony. Most labor for construction was provided by the Civil Works Administration, an element of the Works Progress Administration. The first meeting held to discuss the incorporation was held in Mrs. Jessie Nelson's house, which was once located exactly where the City Hall is standing. City Hall originally also contained the police department and library department, which are now in separate buildings. The time capsule was ordered by resolution on January 22nd, 1934. The original council was actually a board of trustees with a president. City Hall was dedicated on July 30th, 1934. The first major remodel of the building occurred in 1966. Heavy use of interior wood paneling, added bars to the windows, and the new stucco finish. In 1989, the remodel had cost about $600,000, and it was also by chance that with the time capsule, they actually found it by accident. So some workers were just looking at some of the walls of the city hall, and it's like those FBI or like those secret agents. What's this button? And it popped open, and they were surprised. So let's move on to.
Is that angel still in the cemetery?
I can get back to you, but I think it is. Okay, so the 1930s. Okay, so because of the 1920s, we had lots of fires with the oil derricks. So the workers went, and the oil companies went from wood derricks to steel derricks. A steel oil well derrick, the walking beam is of wood. The only other wooden parts are the platforms. This derrick cost erected 50% or more of the wooden derricks. Some companies have standardized on the steel derricks to the exclusions of wood. So here's an image. You can tell by the design it's not as elaborate or spread out as a wooden derrick, but the steel lasted a little bit longer than the wood.
Doesn't burn.
Yeah.
The steel derricks has one but genuine advantage to the wooden derricks: a higher salvage value. If it must be taken down over a dry well, it is claimed to be superior because it is fireproof. However, since fires at oil wells are usually gas fires, the steel derrick is hopelessly wrecked. So, the last steel derrick in Signal Hill was taken down in 1974. However, it was this past year, I was driving on Willow, I was by the cemetery. I was pleasantly surprised to see the steel derrick going west on Willow, right past the cemetery. I had to do a double take and turn around and say, there's a steel derrick. And that wraps about everything up. So, we're going to have questions. Give us a second. We're going to pass around the microphone.
Thank you, David and Natalie. That was quite interesting. Natalie, you had mentioned this, but David, I'm curious. So, what was the population of Signal Hill? So, do you happen to know the population when it was founded, then 1930, and then what it was in 1940?
That's a very good question. I would definitely have to get back to you. That's something I did not research just yet, but I can find that out for you. before everyone goes to ask questions, I'll get a pen and paper. You can write down the questions for me. Question in the back.
I would need, my voice is loud already. Were the fires, it was 1933, were the fires caused by, some of the fires caused by the earthquake?
So for the research that I've been doing, the earthquake possibly
Yeah.
had caused the 1933 fire in Ridgefield fire, but it probably damaged
I was gonna say.
like the motors and some of the structures for the oil wells.
Right.
But one side note I also forgot to mention, thank you for reminding me, the earthquake, it wasn't so much caused by the Signal Hill oil drillings.
Oh.
It was more from Huntington Beach, but everything was on the fault. Thank you. Fault was in my mind. What's that?
We have a nice one up there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, because of, but with all the oil drillings, a lot of the land, we started getting sinkholes. And one of the things that Jessie Nelson did not want to be buried at Sunnyside was because she was afraid that the cemetery was going to fall in.
Well, I live in, right here in California Heights, and the thing was that when I bought my house, it was built in 1924. And, when Mrs. Cheetah sold her house to me, the dividends quit. There's piping underneath, so the house always shifts. So I always think of that, but there's probably still oil in there, because they went to the they ended up putting them to the
It could be.
refineries.
Yeah,
Right.
it really could be.
Yeah.
And
But
a few years ago, I was just curious, I looked up which state has the most earthquakes, and it was in Oklahoma because of all the oil drillings.
right. That's what it's gonna do with fracking now, so, same thing, fracking, yeah. But that's really interesting. Thank you for all that information, though. That's great.
Questions?
Yeah.
Any more questions?
So, if you look at the population here,
Okay, am I good?
so if you happen to be looking for the population, did it change? Did people move out of Long Beach and Signal Hill area after that quake? And then did we come back? Or do you,
Again?
when you look, you find it?
Again, I have to look that up because that was one thing I did not research was the population growth for
Yeah, the census data should tell you that.
yeah, but from like the 1920s. I know a lot of people came in the 1920s, but I'll have to look at and research after the earthquake what did people do if they left.
And then I think too, when the families started to leave the area for a while. When we had that, were you at the Tower House years ago when the woman who was a little girl there came?
No, I missed that.
Okay, yeah, I can't miss it.
I was just wondering, what was the name of the fault? Is it the San Andreas fault or what?
little city.
Those shades go up.
Any last questions?